Welcome to Real Jam Radio. I'm Wes Goldberg. Got a great show for you today. We're going to be joined by the Athletics' Andrew Schlecht about the terrifying Oklahoma City Thunder, Chet Holmgren's growth this season, and what comes next for OKC. Let's jump in. All right, I'm here with Andrew Schlecht, who covers the Oklahoma City Thunder for The Athletic. We're recording this the morning after the Thunder beat down the San Antonio Spurs. Big marquee matchup, as it always is, between Chet Holmgren and Victor Wembanyama. Andrew, thanks so much for jumping on here. We're going to talk a bunch of things, all Oklahoma City Thunder, but we'll just start with the game. Why was it such a beatdown? What kind of stuck out to you from that one?
Yeah, I mean, they really limited Victor in this game. I mean, he had a career low 6 points, only 5 shot attempts. Was pretty wild from him. I mean, they threw almost everybody at him. I think, Jalen Williams had the primary assignment on him and did a good job, but they also had Dort on him at times. They threw Alex Caruso at him. They had all these like smaller, like feisty guards that would kind of get up underneath him. And he just did not like that. You could tell that he was immediately looking to pass whenever the ball hit his hands and there was a Thunder defender there. And so I really think that was really it, just because like he's their primary driver of offense right now. And, Chris Paul is 39-year-old Chris Paul, and there's not really anybody else that can generate. I mean, the Thunder really tried to force it into Jeremy Sohan and have him be the guy to create. And he did okay at times, but if Jeremy Sohan is the guy that's the main driver of offense for you, you're doing something right on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, we saw the Spurs do that last season, and we saw what happened. They actually had to go out and get Chris Paul. So
Yep.
not exactly the best way to get into their offense. And you saw Victor Wembanyama, you already mentioned it, but only taking 5 shots in that game. This is somebody who is very aggressive getting his shots. This is somebody who wants to explore sort of every corner, every expansion of his game. And sometimes it gets him in trouble. And I actually thought that was it was a tough matchup for Oklahoma City, who is so dialed in defensively and makes you pay for every mistake. If you hesitate on a shot or you have a little bit of a loose dribble, like there's Alex Caruso, Kassan Wallace, somebody's going to be there to swipe the ball away from you and make you pay. They just have so many guys on defense. So I'm glad that you pointed out the defense last night, because it's where I want to start with this team, because I think a lot of people peg them as maybe, predicted to have them as the number 1 defense and defensive rating this season. We did a show on here. We kind of ranked our top 10 defenses, and it was actually the easiest one for me to figure out. I'm like, yeah, I think OKC is going to have the number 1 defense. And that was before Isaiah Hartenstein got hurt. We'll talk about Hartenstein here in a second, but they're even better than I thought. And they're even, and maybe not even better is the right word, scarier than I thought. I feel like it's not a good time trying to score against Oklahoma City. And there was moments in that Spurs game where it just felt like they couldn't even get it past half court. They couldn't even get into their half court offense, because you've just got all these arms and limbs just swiping at the ball, getting in your way. They'll Dagnall will sometimes just dial up like a full court press randomly, which it just seems mean. Like you don't need to do that. Like you could stop them in the half court, and you know that, but it just seems like a mean thing to do. But they're mean, man. This is a young, mean, scary defense. The turnovers really, that's the thing.
Yeah.
That jumps off the page. Zach Cram had this, and this was before last night's game, and I can't imagine it changed after last night's game. They're basically forcing a turnover every 5 possessions. That's wild. That's a wild number.
And that may increase because they had 18 steals last night against San Antonio, which ties second most in franchise history for the Thunder. So yeah, I mean, the fact that you can have Kassan Wallace and Lou Dort in the starting lineup, and then you maybe bring a guy in who's better than them on that end, Alex Caruso. And they played some lineups with all 3 of those guys on the court, with Chet and Shea out there. I mean, just the different combinations that you can use of those guys, and the fact that really none of them have to exhaust themselves. Dort played 25 minutes last night. Caruso played 22 minutes last night. Kassan Wallace 29. Nobody is overtaxed, playing this way, which I think is going to make this defense super sustainable. And also right now, they don't have a backup big. The defense looks great, but their backup big man is Ousmane Dieng. And Ous, if anybody's watched Ous throughout his career, or even watched him, before the draft, he's not a big. He is a wing,
Hmm.
but he's been tasked to play the backup 5, and he's done a fine job so far this season. But they still have Jay Will coming back. We actually got news that he aggravated his hamstring that he was coming back from, so he's going to be out for a little while longer. Obviously, you have the Hartenstein hand injury, and Kendrick Williams as well, who I think is getting closer. They assigned him to the G League yesterday so that he could, get some practice run with them. But just getting one of those guys back, I think will help them quite a bit, especially, off the bench and in these non-Chet lineups. But, like you said, like they look scary already. And think about like Hartenstein coming in, where you have 48 minutes of just insane rim protection, which is what they don't have that right now, plus the point of attack defenders that they have. And then not even to mention like Shea is able now, and he's done this for years now, but I think you can fully unlock what he's best at. And that's just playing like off the ball on defense and just finding the basketball, like deflections, steals. I mean, he led the league in steals last year. That is what he is best at. And I think that this version of the Thunder will see that like fully unlocked version of Shea, because he knows that if he goes away from his assignment, which is usually probably like the fourth or fifth best player on the opposing team, that he can just go get the ball, and it's just going to cause more chaos. So, yeah, the defensive end is definitely where the Thunder are going to hang their hat this season.
They're so much fun to watch on defense. Like my favorite player, I think, to watch on defense in the entire league is Jalen Suggs because
Hmm.
it's just always chaos and it's aggravating and it just seems like a really bad time.
Hmm.
Um, like just copy and paste, like but just like all Jalen Suggs, like 15 Jalen Suggs on Oklahoma City, and it's just everybody is just in your face all the time. They're thrilling to watch on defense. Like they're making plays. They're not just standing between the ball and the basket, and it's so interesting to watch. And you mentioned Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and such a great point. I had not necessarily thought of it that way, but this is a guy who routinely is in the top of the league in deflections and steals. And it's almost like the Giannis off-ball, Jaren Jackson Jr. off-ball effect for big men, where you put them next to like a rim protector and you just let them kind of go to town as a free safety. And
Yep.
you get all those weak side blocks and all that kind of stuff. And Shea has mostly been able to do that anyway because you still have Lou Dort and guys like that. But now he could do it even more, to your point, where you could see his steal rate go even higher than what it is now. And instead of just like grabbing the ball, like a lot more pick sixes and all this stuff. And that's what kind of is the important part here with their defense is the fact that I don't know if we keep track of this stat. If somebody has this, it would be great. But like just stops and scores. I
Yeah.
think the Thunder are just going to lead the league in stops and scores. They probably already are. This is my made up anecdotal stat here, but it just feels like they have so many ways to stop you and in so many ways to score. And particular in transition, they're terrifying, and that's really a big part of their offense. I actually want to talk to you about some of their half court offensive issues here in a second, but I don't want to move off the Hartenstein subject yet. Shout out to Usman Jang. I actually thought he's been doing a pretty good job. Had a few rebounds last night in that Spurs game. But you're right. Like this is going to add a whole other element. If there is a weak part of the Thunder right now, they're still bottom five in rebounding rate. The idea of signing Hartenstein is he kind of just fixes that by himself.
Mhm.
Maybe they're not going to be top three the way the Knicks were last year, but even league average from bottom of the league is a huge difference. When Hartenstein comes back, are we just to assume that he's going to go into that starting lineup, or is Mark Dagnall going to kind of say, you know what, we're going to go by matchup here? Maybe sometimes we'll go Hartenstein, sometimes we'll keep Chet at the five, go a little bit smaller. Is it going to be more matchup driven?
Uh, I think that they just like the idea of being unpredictable more
Mm,
than it is matchup driven. I think that they like the idea that the opposing team doesn't really know what they're going to do or what they're going to throw at them. And so I'd be a little surprised if they just went with Hardenstein as the starter for the rest of the season when he comes back. I think they're going to continue to mix and match, and I think they see that as an advantage, and they always kind of have. They've always kind of done wacky things with their rotations. They were inconsistent, every year that Mark has been the coach, and they see that as a way to gain advantages. I mean, you look at the lineup data from last year. There's basically two lineups that you have good data on for the Thunder. On like when you sort it on NBA.com, and the rest is just like such a small sample that it's like I don't really know what to do with this. And I think the Thunder like that.
that's the idea.
I
Yeah.
think that that's how they want to handle this. And so now that I feel like I mean, this team really doesn't have much of an ego, and, like, I don't get the impression that Hartenstein does. I know Caruso doesn't. Um, I think that they feel like the freedom to just do whatever they want on a night-to-night basis. And sometimes it could be matchup driven, and sometimes they want to be the team that drives the matchup, though.
Hmm.
We saw that with them playing Minnesota last year. You thought, "Okay, this is a night where we'll see Jay Will and Chet on the court together." No. They played Chet as the lone big, and then they played Kenrich Williams as the backup center, who's like 6'5". They didn't play Jay Will that night. They want to drive the matchups. They're not going to look across the other bench and say, "Okay, who do we need to get to match up against this guy or that guy?" Like, no, they want to be the team that is making. They made the Wolves pull Rudy Gobert off the floor.
Hmm.
Last year, they want to be the team to do that, and so I think that they are fully focused on themselves and kind of figuring out what they want to be. And I honestly don't know the answer to the starting deal with Hartenstein, but I do know that not only will he add like a level of defense for them at the rim and rebounding, but I think that we're seeing a little bit that they lack some playmaking off the bench. The AJ Mitchell, he's done a good job so far as a rookie. I think that as a two-way player, you have to be really pleased with what you've seen from him.
Yeah.
But you can put Hartenstein in the middle of the floor, and he's going to create for guys like Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins and Casey Wallace and Caruso. All really smart players that know how to move off ball, that can find creases and get to the hoop. I think that he's going to be perfect for that unit whenever he gets back. So I think that what we're seeing has been really impressive, but I think that offensively and defensively, he's going to help quite a bit once he gets back in the lineup.
Yeah, it just feels like he's going to fill in gaps. It's like $30 million just to kind of fill in these gaps, and it's
Yeah.
$30 million well spent. And you
Hmm.
you mentioned the offensive stuff. I'm so excited for that because we started seeing it a little bit with the Knicks last year, where they put him in that triple threat spot
Yep.
because they just didn't, outside of Jalen Brunson, they just didn't have anything else in terms of playmaking. And I think in the preseason with Oklahoma City, before Hartenstein got hurt, you even saw him doing that facilitation from that high post area with the water polo passes over the head to Alex Caruso and kind of stuff like that. And you're just like, oh my God. Like
Hmm.
another now they have another thing. And that's why I always keep going back to the word terrifying with Oklahoma City. I just keep using this word. It's like, okay, you fix this problem over here, and then another leak springs loose over here, and you're like, God, now we
Yep.
got to fix this thing over here. I do want to shout out uh, Mitchell there though, because he's been really impressive. I thought off the bench for them as a two-way guy. But
Mhm.
you mentioned sort of the mixing and matching there. So for Oklahoma City's fifth starter this year, they've gone with Isaiah Joe, Kason Wallace, Aaron Wiggins, and then again with Wallace last night against San Antonio.
Mhm.
Is that okay? We're going with Wallace now, or do you still
Uh,
think that we're going to see the unpredictability with that fifth spot too?
yeah, I think they want to keep it unpredictable. I think that
Yeah.
they like the idea that they can be different night in, night out. Um, so that would be my expectation moving forward, is that spot continues to change, and I think Hartenstein will fill in. I still think Alex Caruso is going to eventually get a chance to start at some point as well. Um, so yeah, I think that they just like the unpredictability of it.
I I agree with you, I think, but I my only issue with it is what if Kason Wallace just gets too good?
Yeah,
Like, what if he's
good.
just so freaking good, right? Like, I last night, like defensively, he's all over the place. He had two
Mhm,
steals again last night. He put Trey Young the other night in a straight jacket. Like
mhm.
again, to the point where Trey Young, who's one of the best ball handlers in the league, couldn't even get it up half court half the time without Wallace just swapping it away from him. There might get to be a point here where he's just too good to start like Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins, who are good players. Like no disrespect to them, but it just feels like Wallace's ceiling is so much higher. It's like, okay, when does he reach that ceiling? And just you just have to play him at some point.
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I mean, he played more than any of these guards that we're talking about. He played more than Dort last night. He played more than Caruso and Joe and Wiggins. It's certainly possible that they do just settle on him, which is not what a lot of people locally predicted. I think a
Hmm.
lot of people thought Caruso would get that slot, um, but Kaysen is. It's funny because, and Presti talked about this before the season. He was saying that if Casey Wallace was like their only young player, then people would talk about him so glowingly.
Such a good point.
But the fact that it's Chet first, and then it's J Dub, and then you don't really get a chance to like let this guy shine. But if he were on the Warriors, or if he was on the Mavericks, or a team that doesn't have like a ton of young guys, everybody would be like, whoa, like this, like watch out for Case and Wallace. But because he's like so far down the list of guys that you want to talk about, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. But like defensively, the ceiling is really high. Offensively, he had a move last night where he got all the way to the hoop and scored, off the bounce, which I thought was impressive and something that's kind of developing for him. And then if he can just continue to shoot, if he could really start to shoot the three ball better, he's had a kind of rough start to the season shooting it. But I think there's certainly a chance that he's one of these guys that like has a higher ceiling than what we think, and is just being kind of hidden in plain view because the Thunder have so many like bright, shiny objects.
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. With Game Time Picks, curation makes it easier to save more on sports, comedy, concerts, theater, and any event that you want to attend. By using the all-in pricing feature, you see your total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. With Seat Views, you get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Game Time is the place to get your tickets for your events. With their lowest price guarantee, if you find a cheaper ticket, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. And with Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code CLNS for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. It's so funny that you say that because I remember when they drafted him, everybody's like, really? They got this guy? Like, I can't believe he fell to him. Like, this is such a perfect fit. And even with Ousmane Dieng, like, they traded 3 first-round picks for this guy to move up and get this guy. And it's another one of those things that, like, you're saying, like, I don't know, maybe he'll be the backup center, probably not, like, whatever. It's like any other team that traded 3 picks for a guy and they don't have a spot in the rotation, their front office would be getting killed for that. And I'm not even saying that the Thunder should be getting killed. They just have so many good players that it's hard to find a spot for him. Like I said, I like what Us has been doing this year. Like, he's a bigger body. He brings the ball up. He could play in transition. Like this, I think he's been a lot more decisive than he's been in the past. Like, there's a lot to like about what he's shown early on, but they have so many luxuries here. It's pretty wild. And if one of Us or Wallace pop here, or again AJ Mitchell, who I like, if even one of these guys pop, it's like another thing that you have to deal with when you're playing the Thunder. The Was last night's game, because you mentioned that the shooting struggles mostly with Wallace, but the team overall has not shot well. 31% from three-point range all season. They had a better night against the Spurs, 41.5%, 17 of 41. I thought going into that Spurs game, obviously they have not lost a game, but I also didn't think that they had played their A game yet. I didn't think they actually played an awesome basketball game yet, and there's still some issues on offense that we can explore here, but was last night's Spurs game maybe the best game they've played all season in your mind?
Oh, yeah, I agree with you that they have not played a great game yet. There were stretches, I think, that was some of their best basketball last night. I wouldn't say overall that it was great. It's hard because I just know that throughout these 4 games that I know they can be better than this.
Yeah.
And defensively, I would give them an A.
Mhm.
Offensively, they probably are at like a C- for the season. Some of it is that they're trying to find ways to shoot more threes,
Mhm.
and they're making effort to do that. They made 17 last night. That's pretty good for the Thunder. And some of it is Shea is kind of taking these opportunities that I feel like he knows that, like, we're gonna beat San Antonio. So let me kind of explore the studio space a little bit and see what I can do. And he took a lot of pull-up threes last night. He took 10 threes, which is unusual for Shea. He had 6.25, which I think ties a career high for threes attempted in a quarter for him. So I think some of it is that they're just kind of trying stuff and trying to figure out new ways that they can be successful in the offensive end, and it hasn't really worked so far. But I think it's one of those things offensively that they're hoping will pay dividends down the road as they continue to kind of experiment and figure out what the limitations are for them. And if they can do it, while winning games by 12, even better. But yeah, I think that some of it is like they're just not making shots. Like
Yeah.
J Dub has not really made shots yet. Shea has not been as efficient as we think he should be. Alex Caruso is not making shots. I think all of those things will come around and they'll be fine. But I don't know how much you can complain if you're the Thunder.
Right.
you know, you have by far the best defensive rating so far, which is, not a number that I really even like to call out 4 games into the season. It doesn't really matter, but they're just holding opponents to, I think, 91 points per 100 possessions right now, which is just unheard of. So when you can do that, there's a lot of margin for error for them on the offensive end.
Yeah, and in terms of their defensive rating, they haven't had the hardest schedule, but they haven't had an easy schedule either. I mean, they opened the season against the Denver Nuggets, Nikola Jokic, everything. We saw Chet Holmgren do what he did there. Chicago, they're feistier than people thought, and their offense is actually, a problem, right?
Yeah.
Their defense is easy to score against, but offensively they're a problem. And then Atlanta has Trae Young and all these other things like this. Those are good teams. And then San Antonio with Victor Wembanyama is probably the best or the worst team that they've played. Them in Chicago, but yeah, I mean, there's in terms of the half court issues, like you were talking about last night, and I'm glad you put it that way because I hadn't really thought about it that way. Because you look at the box score and you're like, all right, 10 threes for Shea Gilgeous-Alexander. That's probably not what they want. They don't want Shea leading the team in 3-point shots. They want him creating those 3-point shots for his teammates. But it did feel that way watching it. It's like, yeah, let me throw this thing up there and see what's going to happen here. But they did get up 41 3-point attempts last night. Again, 10 of those from Shea. But the Jalen Williams struggles are kind of the most interesting part of all of this because it felt like we were ready to make him the number 2 guy in Oklahoma
Mhm.
City, and it again only 4 games. He's missing bunnies. He's missing things short. I don't really know what's going on there. I'm not concerned. You know what I mean? Like he'll
Yeah.
figure it out. Like that's not an issue. But it's happened, and the Thunder have still looked this way. Meanwhile, Chet Holmgren has taken. It feels like a real step.
Yeah.
And specifically in terms of just creating his own shot, like taking guys off the dribble, he looks stronger. I mean, that block against Nikola Jokic on opening night, and then to take the ball and then score on the other end with the dunk, and what he's been doing, it feels like okay. Everybody was in a rush to make this Jalen Williams and Shea Gilgeous-Alexander's team, and or maybe it's a big 3 or whatever, but I don't know. Chet Holmgren is probably going to be the second best player on this team, I would imagine, going forward, which is a good problem to have if you're trying to figure out if it's going to be Chet or J Dub. What have you seen from Chet Holmgren, though, in terms of his individual growth?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is the strength, and then some of it is just like his handle is a lot better. You can just tell that he really worked on that. And with that, I think that he feels more just confident to use his passing chops as well. So it's just all kind of coming together for him. Things seem to be slowing down a bit for him as well. And he just seems to be like in really good condition too, which is something that kind of waned as the season went on last year for him. I think that after going through an 82 game season, I think he knows how to better handle that, and, hasn't really had to be overtaxed either through these 4 games. He hasn't had to play just a ton of minutes, which I think is really good for him. But yeah, he is finding ways to score that he wasn't last year, particularly one-on-one. I think he feels really confident getting to the hoop. Um, and like when he's the 5 in this like 5-out offense, I think that is when he's most dangerous because teams have to do some kind of cross matching a lot of times to deal with him because he's out on the perimeter, and there's a lot of times that you can't put your perimeter big out there. So it's like, where do we hide our big? And
And there's no Josh Giddey anymore to
there's
do
no Josh
that.
Giddey. And so like people have been using like Lou Dort as that guy, which has not worked out for them so far. I think Lou's shooting over 40% from 3 so far this season. He's shooting 57.9% from 3 so far this season. Like he's really making guys pay for sagging off of him. and it just opens everything up for Chet. And so not the Josh Giddey thing certainly I think is helping just because there's a lot more room in the starting lineup now for Chet to operate. But when you couple that with like the improved handle, just like the improved confidence as well coming into the season, it's really kind of unlocked things for Chet. And yeah, I mean, with this talking about like who's the second best player, I mean, I think that, any you take any like 4-game bite from any season, you're going to see different things. I think that we'll see 4-game stretches where J-Dub is playing better than Chet. I think that we'll see probably 10-game stretches where Chet does look like the second best player. We'll probably see 4 or 5-game stretches where Chet looks like the best player on the Thunder. I think that's kind of the beauty of this roster too, and the beauty of like Shea's leadership in particular. Like Shea just wants to win. Shea doesn't have to be the guy. He doesn't have to be the one driving everything. He a lot of times is because he just is like flat out like the best guy, and like some nights he looks like the best player in the world. But if someone else has it going, he's fine to create for them. I mean, there was a game last season, and I refer to this moment a lot just because I thought it was really impactful. They were playing Boston in Oklahoma City. It was a close game. Thunder really needed a bucket, and Shea set a screen for J-Dub to free him up to get him a jumper. And he made the jumper, and that really sealed the win for the Thunder. That just like shows that like Shea doesn't have to be the guy to do it. He will facilitate other players. And Boston didn't really know how to deal with that. Seeing Shea be the one to set the screen and roll off, it was kind of jarring, and it just opened everything up for J-Dub. And so
It's kind of that unpredictability that you talk about, which is sort of a theme with this team, but also the
yeah,
lack of ego, right? Like talking
yeah.
about even who's the second, first, third best player is almost a silly conversation, it feels like, with this team, because it feels like it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I talked to Shea before the season, and one of the things that he said about Mark Daigneault was that he said Mark has really opened my eyes up to a different way of viewing the game,
Mm.
and a different way. And he talked about the unpredictability of it, with lineups and strategies. Like he said he's really that's really starting to click with him, like what they can actually accomplish when these strategies are used and used well. So it's been kind of cool to see this all evolve.
Um, in terms of what they can do offensively, if there's a concern here, it's the 3-point shooting with Oklahoma City, right? They did lead the league last year. They were number one in 3-point shooting percentage at like 39%, but that dipped in the playoffs to something closer to league average. And you look at the personnel on this roster, and I do think they're probably closer to league average than probably being the best 3-point shooting team in the league. I think that's fair. Right now, they're 28th. They're shooting 31% from 3-point range. I think they're better than that.
Yeah.
Clearly, they are. But where do you think they sort of level out in terms of just 3-point shooting? And then we can kind of talk about what their ceiling looks like offensively.
I mean, I kind of expect them to be a good 3-point shooting team. I don't know if they reach the heights that they did last year, but I think that they're going to be I think Chet's better than a 33% 3-point shooter.
Yeah.
I think that Shea is better than a 27% 3-point shooter. I think J-Dub's better than a 22% 3-point shooter. Same with Aaron Wiggins, Case and Wallace. I mean, all these guys are just shooting way below who they are. I mean, Alex Caruso, like we have like a catalog of threes from him that shows that like this is a pretty good 3-point shooter. I think he's 37% for his career. He's shooting 11% right now. So I think like this is a little bit of an aberration for them right now, from three. I think they're gonna have. I feel like an avalanche is coming at some point where they're
Yep.
all going to shoot like 50% for like a week, and they're just going to bludgeon teams by like 30. I think that's incoming for the Thunder. But yeah, I think that they end up probably in the top 10. I don't know if they're, top half of the league. A lot of it is like most teams do this, but like the shot quality metrics is something that's really big for the Thunder that they look at. I think that I heard Mark say this the other day that they like 75% of the shots they took last season from three, like good, clean, quality looks. So far this season, it's been between 75 and 80. So like they really like the looks that they're getting. They're just not falling yet. And so I really think that this is going to level out at some point, and they're going to find themselves like in the top 10 and 3-point percentage again. And some of this is like they've increased their 3-point rate quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so like you're likely to see a dip. I don't think they'll be the number one team in 3-point percentage again, but yeah, I expect them to be toward the top half of the season, top half of the league. Cause you look up and down the roster, it's like, who do you think is like a bad 3-point shooter?
Right.
You know, I mean, Oos is probably not a good 3-point shooter. We don't know with AJ Mitchell yet. Like everybody else, I think that we trust, like Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins, Caruso, Casey Wallace. Dort has like become a really good 3-point shooter. You know, J-Dub's a great shooter. Chet Holmgren, you know, Shea is like maybe a below average 3-point shooter, but he's not a 27% 3-point shooter, like I said.
Right.
So I think this is, it's funny that like they're one of two teams that are undefeated right now, and yet like we haven't seen them play that great yet.
Again, it's terrifying. Yeah, you look at they don't have like they don't have the Klay Thompson, Steph Curry type of, oh my God, that's a shooter, close out like crazy, don't let.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they're all good enough that the sum is better than the parts or whatever, where they're all playing in space and you have to defend all of that space. And then, if you do close out hard, all these guys could put the ball on the floor and get to the basket. And that's the thing, again, with Chet, it's so impressive now without Giddey being there. Opposing teams used to slot their center on Giddey all the time, and now they kind of have to do it against Chet a lot, and that's a loss. You're going to probably take an L on that if Chet's outside and he catches the ball and either catch and shoots or you close out hard and he could just dribble right by you. And that's the crazy thing about Chet. And I don't mean to keep comparing him. Everybody compares him and Victor Wembanyama, and I get it, and it's going to happen. But he almost seems more polished than Victor Wembanyama, right? Where I thought like in last night's game, Vic is still trying to like do all these experiment with all these different things, and Chet just is like, yeah, this is what I do. I know how to do it, and I'm going to get really good at this stuff. And again, he's gotten better off the dribble. And the crazy thing about Chet, and you don't really say this about 7-footers, is he's a hooper.
Yeah.
Like you don't see, you don't make 7-footers hoopers, but he's got like respect from like Kevin Durant and all these guys, like the way that hoopers get, and that's important. And I think that only speaks to sort of what his ceiling is, which at this point is probably limitless. So, yeah, there's just a lot of good things happening there. Support for today's episode comes from Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars awarded in winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get on action on sports in over 30 states, including California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my pick hits, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks now offers Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts, like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value for your lineups. Think Steph Curry will get more than 4 3-pointers next week? Anthony Edwards for more than 27 points? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this basketball season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today. Use the code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. In terms of their ceiling offensively, I mean, I don't think we need to overthink it. There's enough shooting here. I agree with you. They're shooting 31% so far this year, which means the reversion to the mean. There's going to be a week where they're shooting 45% from 3, and I guess it doesn't matter because they'll still be undefeated, and they're undefeated now. So, but as long as you have decent enough shooting, guys who can attack off the dribble, and an MVP candidate in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I think you're going to be fine offensively. Where they ran into trouble in the playoffs last year was when Jalen Williams was overtaxed with playmaking duties, when Chet was overtaxed with playmaking duties. But I look at that less as a concern and more of just growing pains, right? Yeah. Like this is their first playoff experience. They're going to figure it out. And you have so many weapons now and so many counters and with Caruso and Hartenstein and all these things that like, I don't look at last playoffs and say, yeah, they need to fix this. I look at it as they'll grow from this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think the thing that people aren't thinking too much about yet, just because we're still a ways away from it, is that we haven't even reached the point where like Shea and Chet and J Dub are in like their overlapping primes yet. You know,
Hmm.
like Chet is still really young. J Dub is in year 3. Chet's 22. J Dub is, I think he just turned 23. He turned 23 this year. I mean, once these guys are 24, 25, and Shea is where he's at, then like that's when things start to actually get scary for this team. Like they're not even there yet.
Hmm.
They're not even there this year. Like this whole year, they won't have overlapping primes between their 3 main guys yet. You still have these guys that are still at a very young age. And so I think that I think the Thunder are planning more for those overlapping prime years for like to really figure things out. Um, and to make sure that like the right role players are around these guys. I still think and before then there's going to be a lot of experimenting, and you know I think they're going to win while they're experimenting. But I do think like there's something really special happening in Oklahoma City that I think that we're just scratching the surface of it,
Has
because that's like,
anything? Oh,
yeah, go
sorry.
ahead.
Go ahead. No, has anything surprised you? Because they were a team like everybody. They're young. They made the playoffs last year. People
Mhm.
picking them for the #1 seed. They're the favorite to come out of the Western Conference and make the finals. So maybe the answer could be nothing, and that would be fine. But has anything surprised you so far?
This season,
Yeah.
I mean, I thought Chet would make a leap. I didn't know that he would be this good this fast. Like
Crazy.
that has been probably the most surprising thing. That and like AJ Mitchell playing, like a two-way player playing on this like really deep roster. He's somebody who has played so well in, he played well in preseason. He's played well at camp. Like he's just kind of like demanded minutes
I,
from the
I
team.
I really like him. I keep trying to shoehorn him into this conversation if you can't tell,
Mhm.
so I'm glad you brought him back up. But he's got like a drive and kick game
Mhm.
that is really helpful to this team. Where I forget which game it was, one of the early games in the season, and I honestly didn't watch him in summer league or anything like that. And I'm just like, I had to look at like who's number 25? Like what is this guy doing here? And I looked, I'm like AJ Mitchell, two-way guy. Like what's he doing? And I'm like this guy can play, and he had some good minutes against San Antonio last night.
Yeah, he is like if you ever get a chance to meet AJ Mitchell, like within like 10 seconds of talking to him, you can tell like, wow, like this is like a genuinely like really sharp guy. Like he is like
That makes
really,
sense.
really smart and personable. And you just know within just a few minutes of just talking to him, like, oh, this guy's different. Like there's something different about this guy.
Hmm.
Just from like a personality, like leadership standpoint, like you can tell like this guy's got it. He grew up overseas. He grew up in Belgium. His dad played professional basketball in Belgium. Came back here. He played at UC Santa Barbara for 3 years. It's another mid-major guy that's having success with the Thunder, and he's just found a way to just get into this rotation. He competes. He's not hard to fit into any lineup, whether he's the point guard or playing on the wing. He's really strong. He's 22. He's like,
Yeah.
I think he's like the same age as Chet. So like he played 3 years in college, but he's a guy that I think will make it in the league. When the Thunder are fully healthy, like does he get 20 minutes off the bench? Probably not. But for now, like just having this guy on a two-way contract, they'll probably keep him on the two-way as long as they can, and then probably try to convert him at some point. But I think that they've found something in AJ, and I think it wouldn't be shocking if the Thunder felt pretty proud of themselves for finding this guy in the second round. They clearly wanted to get him, because they had to trade up, I think, 3 times in the second round to get up to the range where he was going to be. And so they really were making an effort on that second day of the draft this past summer. But yeah, I mean, I think that this is a guy that like they're really excited about. They should be. He's got a lot of skill. Projects. I mean, he's like a lefty point guard, Aaron Wiggins. Like I feel like
Right.
he's another one of those guys that's just solid across the board. He's going to help you win basketball games. He's not going to mess up. He can fit in. He can score. He can defend. He can do really whatever you need him to do. He can do it. And so, yeah, I'm. I've been impressed watching him so far. The thing that he did really well at UC Santa Barbara was just like finishing around the rim. Like he was great at getting to his spots, finishing around the rim. And you saw that on display last night against San Antonio.
So there's going to be patience experimenting with Oklahoma City, young roster, no rush to do anything, but they did make the Gordon Hayward trade last season. That was, there was a lot of cap ramifications that went along with that. But, do you anticipate maybe anything happening? Is there going to do you think that they should maybe explore trades? Is there anything that they're missing on this roster even after adding Hartenstein and Caruso?
It's hard to say right now just because we haven't seen them play with Hartenstein yet
Yeah.
against real NBA competition. And so, I mean, I think that you can always use like 6'8" wings that can kind of do it all. I think that that's something that they don't really have on this roster. So I think like that's something you could look for more like, creators off the bench too. I think that's something that they don't really have, especially playoff time. Like AJ looks great right now.
Right.
Like, are you going to trust a rookie in the playoffs, to handle minutes and the pressure of that? It's just, I mean, it's so different that I don't think you necessarily are going to be counting on him come playoff time. But you'll shorten the rotation. It's going to be staggering. J-Dub and Shea and Hartenstein is going to be in there too to help play make. So I don't think it'll be a problem then. The thing about that you can count on with Sam Presti is like he's always going to make a trade. Like he always does. Whether it's a draft pick trade or he's trying to get a player or he's, I mean, last year, like the maneuver was like, yeah, if Gordon Hayward works out, great. Like what I really want to do is generate as much cap space as possible so that we can go make a run at somebody. And they did that. And so I think you can always count on Sam like tinkering and like trying to find little gaps and trying to find ways to maximize what they have. I wouldn't be surprised if they took a draft pick that they have in one of these next two drafts and trade it for a pick in like 2030 that's a little bit more valuable, like less protections or whatever. I think that he's been doing that. He's been taking these like picks that are like, hey, contender team X, would you like to have the 25th pick in this draft? All you have to do is give us this pick that's way far out and put way less protections on it. And, we'll be glad to do it. And teams have been biting on that. And so I think you can count on those kinds of things to continue for this team, just because one, like they have a lot of guys on the roster right now that you can count on, and they don't really need that. But as far as like roster needs and like players they could trade for, I just feel like it's probably just too early to really know.
Andrew Schlecht does a great job covering the Thunder for The Athletic. You can check him out over there, The Athletic NBA Show, Down to Dunk podcast, the Saturday Slam and Jam. Andrew, thanks for the time.
Thanks, Wes. Thanks for having me.